In the last episode, we discussed Betty and Barney Hill, a New Hampshire couple who had their experience that was out of this world. After allegedly being abducted while on their honeymoon, the couple went on to toil over what actually happened, only telling a few very close family and friends about the events of that night. But after Betty decided to find her own answers against the wishes of Barney, she would continue to hear the same suggestion over and over: hypnosis therapy. In this episode, we'll explore those sessions and then touch on the subject that is often overlooked: the top of Barney's penis area. This is part 2 of the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill.
Betty and Bumpy Hill.
I said a part that's often overlooked: Barney's upper penis area, and Chris collapsed. Hey! Welcome back. If you're clicking this and you didn't want part 1, are you dumb? Watch part 1, you fucking idiot. You moron. You stupid. So we're going to, part 2. Today's episode is going to be fucking juicy as shit. This episode is going to be more packed than the first episode. Believe it or not.
Not.
It's going to be... All right. Well, I can't wait to prove you wrong. There's going to be a lot of crazy details. There's going to be a lot of really fun stuff. There's going to be a lot of fun references. This episode's going to be a lot less serious and more fantastical and interesting. And if you reach the same conclusion as me, absolutely fucking mind-blowingly unbelievable. Here we go. Sources. Once again! For today, the source is mainly captured, Betty and Barney Hill, the UFO experience, we did this last time, by famed and human Ewok Stanton T. Friedman, Kathleen Marden, niece of Betty Hill, with the original book, Interrupt the Journey, by John G. Fuller, also making an appearance. I would highly recommend it captured if you want more info on the case, and the book is filled with a plethora of details and really does a decent job of setting the record straight, with Friedman and Martin passively aggressively taking shots at Fuller and his telling of the events. We did that last time, so I don't really know why I put that in, because if you didn't listen to part 1, again, you're going to be lost and confused. You need to learn how to count. It's about time. If you have a phone and you're able to download podcasts, you should be able to count.
1.
Recap. We're going to recap the first episode. In our last episode, we met Betty and Barney Hill. The New Hampshire newlyweds would have an out-of-this-world honeymoon. You did that twice, I guess. After gathering a few things and a little money, the two would head off on a weekend of relaxation and sightseeing. But after a storm threatened their trip, the pair decided to make an early return home, taking the scenic route to make up for lost time. But this would prove to be a monumental turn in the lives of Betty and Barney Hill in the most extreme way. In a field, the two would observe the craft, with Barney even approaching the disc-shaped object, again, sometimes cigar-shaped, silently floating above the field. But after seeing up to 11 beings in the window of the ship, he would run back to the car where the craft would begin its chase. But after the beeps, the Hills realized the craft had disappeared, and so had a chunk of their night. The next few days were strange for the two, with them debating internally, with each other, whether they should tell anyone about their unbelievable encounter. And after some deliberation, they landed on hypnosis therapy. So go listen to part 1 for a much more detailed look into the story. But again, I don't really know why. I'm not going to do it again. Okay. Learn to count, you fucking moron. Now, let's get to the part 2 of Betty and Barney Hill. Part 2. That's exactly what I wrote. Right back at it. On December 14th, 1963, almost 2 years after the initial events, the Hills... I'm sorry, Mike, what's going on with you? How are you doing? I just realized
It's been a week, so...
We definitely didn't film it 45 minutes ago, so I definitely didn't just, it's not like I just forgot to do that because I've been sitting with you for 3 hours. That definitely is not
No, I'm doing pretty good. I had a very, very long week.
What'd you do in the time...
compared to the week that we had when we were here last time talking about...
Different week.
What are there? Betty and Barney Hill. It's been so long, I forgot,
Yeah.
God, I can't wait to fucking off myself. Continue.
What did you do this week? If you want, make sure you off that subscribe button.
Yeah, go click, click, click. And then
Kill
I
it.
won't go
Murder
bang,
it.
bang, bang.
Murder it. Kill it. So, on December 14th, 1963, almost 2 years after the initial events, the Hills met with Dr. Benjamin Simon, a pioneer of the technique of hypnosis regression. That sentence did not come out great. Benjamin Simon is legitimately a world-renowned psychotherapist. He has been doing this for a very long time, and this case, no joke, he thought was going to ruin his career. He has maintained a very professional attitude about it. I will give you right up front, if you were looking for this doctor, the hypnotherapist to be on board totally, it's not going to happen. He keeps a very neutral view the entire time, and I'll explain why. Betty would write about this consultation with Benjamin Simon, Dr. Benjamin Simon, stating, Mike, if you'd like to take over as Betty.
When Bonnie and I presented ourselves to Dr. Simon in December 1963, we had many questions about hypnosis. What was hypnosis? Dr. Simon told us that no one really knew what it was. However, the kind he used was not the same as stage hypnosis, which we had seen in public demonstrations, but a special technique he had used as the chief neuropsychiatry for men returning from the war front in 1940s.
Good reading. Jesus.
Later, Bonnie asked Dr. Simon what a hallucination was, so Dr. Simon gave him a demonstration. Bonnie saw the office door open, saw a little dog come into the room, felt him jump up on his lap and begin licking his face, and finally saw him go back into the hall. Bonnie saw and felt the dog, but all the while he knew it was not real. It was
imaginary.
Yep. Honestly, Mike, that was the first time he had ever looked at that paragraph. Yeah. I got to give it to you. That was
Thank you.
You hit neuropsychiatry fucking beautifully. Yeah. Good shit on that.
Acting school, man. Cold reading.
All right, Mike, enough. We get it, okay? The whole thing about this is that basically the doctor made a phantom dog appear in front of Barney, apparently.
Jesus.
And if you've ever seen, if you've ever been to a resort or any vacation ever, and they have a hypnotic magician.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I was working on
it's remarkably common when you go on vacations out of the country and they need to entertain you as if you're in the country. It's very strange. They do the exact same thing that Benjamin Simon, Dr. Benjamin Simon, he did to Barney what they do to people on stage, but just as an example to show him what he was going to do and not to embarrass him in front of all the people he's spending a week with.
Huh.
You know? I watched one where they made a woman act like a chicken on stage, and they let her act like a chicken for like 10 full minutes, and that's a lot of chicken for one person.
My favorite, there's a video. I don't remember the people's names, but there's a video of this guy. But this guy got hypnotized by a neuro whatever, and he was like, "Now when you wake up, you're gonna be a Martian." So he smacks the back of the guy's head, and he goes, "So how you feeling? Welcome to Earth." And the guy goes,
"That's absolutely, yeah, that's." Honestly, exactly what it is. Yeah,
it's the funniest thing.
And hypnosis is obviously kind of not misunderstood. It's not very widely studied at this point. It's not even really widely studied now. We know it works for certain things, but we just don't really know how why it works. We know how it works. We just don't know why. We don't understand how we're able to put ourselves in a trance, but we can. But we're going to get into exactly what hypnotherapy is in a little bit. I went into a little bit of explanation to get into it because I feel like if we're going to talk about it, we should know what it is so that we know whether or not we should believe it's bullshit or not. The Hills were then put into a 3-week prep course by Dr. Simon to prepare them for the journey ahead. Since Simon wanted them to do as much as possible with just hypnosis alone, needing not to rely on the use of things like sodium pentothal to make the subject more comfortable, which is like typical truth serum. And the doctor was extremely skeptical of the supposed abduction, assuming this hypothesis would prove to everyone that they were mistaken and nothing out of the world happened that night. And they were either implanted false memories in themselves through talking to each other, or they were just totally making it up. And his goal was genuinely, he thought he was going to put them on there and go, we'll figure it out. They didn't get abducted. That was how he went into it. And now we're going to get into Betty's nightmares as we left off last week. During the time after that the abduction happened, right? Within the first 5 days, she started getting nightmares, which lasted about a week. These nightmares she wrote down, and over the course of talking to people and getting to the point where she's talking to Dr. Benjamin Simon, the nightmares have kind of come together, and she's giving him that information.
So she has a story put together.
She kind of put it together herself, yeah. Now, mind you, she didn't make this story up. The story is in fragments in a journal, and then it's put together by her separately. Dr. Simon will go on to interview the two separately, hoping to come up with a simple hypothesis. Betty had a series of nightmares, which were then falsely implanted in both her and Barney through just, suggestion and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The two of them would be interviewed separately, both hypnotized and not, to help Dr. Simon determine whether these are simple nightmares or something much more sinister. Betty would start the process, giving Dr. Simon the notes of her nightmares. So now let's get into the details of Betty's nightmares. I'm going to add music. You're good.
Oh, sorry.
You're good, man. I appreciate it.
It was an audition tape.
Thanks, man. According to Betty's dreams, The two were not only chased and stopped by the UFO, but made contact with the beings and even boarded their craft. Betty began from the roadblock, where she claims the beings surrounded her car. She describes them as being gray beings between 4 to 5 feet tall with large, prominent chests and Jimmy Durante-style noses. You need to look up a Jimmy Durante-style nose, right? And just look up Jimmy Durante. His nose is so comically large. If you've ever seen... He is the narrator of Frosty the Snowman, the old Frosty the Snowman, and he's drawn with a giant nose, and that's not exaggerating. If anything, they toned it down to make it less ridiculous.
Oh, good.
His nose is so comically large that the thought of these little guys running around with giant noses is so funny to me. Because it's giant, they're just little Elmer Fuds, gray Elmer Fuds running around, speaking some space language with lisps. It's fantastic. I love it. They were supposedly at this point wearing navy blue military attire, but that's going to change. This is just in the dream. Remember, this is the dream, not the actual story. The beings would then lead the two out of the car into the woods, making their way onto the craft. Once on the craft, Betty describes the type of examinations they did to her in the nightmares. They would clip her nails and scratch her skin, seemingly saving the samples, while also taking hair and earwax from her and putting them into glass slides. They then undressed her and famously stuck a large needle into her stomach to test if she was pregnant, causing her blinding pain. But after the leader of the figures realized that she was in immense pain, the creature would wave his hand over her eyes, making the pain disappear entirely.
That's wild.
Yeah, so this is interesting because basically, if you this might be where you've heard the tapes, because it's Betty going, and then they took a needle and they put it in my navel, and she just keeps going, in my navel, and it's brutal to listen to because it's very annoying. But she's describing how they're putting a giant needle in her stomach from her belly button to test if she's pregnant.
Well, if she was, whatever it was is dead now.
Yeah, imagine if she was pregnant. Like, oops. Sorry.
That was it.
Oops. Glaxar accidentally killed your fucking child. My bad, Betty.
Glaxar.
The examination was now over, and Betty would begin having a conversation with the leader, answering the leader's questions about Barney's dentures. While she explained to these creatures how Barney lost his teeth and how dentures were normally worn by older people, she says that the beings watched intently while she described as shaking their heads in disbelief. So they're all just like, oh my God, he lost his teeth how? Betty then began looking around the room, grabbing a book, asking if she could take it with her. Though surprisingly, the leader was okay with it. But the others in the room had a very human response of, you're fucking kidding, right? Literally. And Betty was forced to return the book. She would write down the drawings, like the hieroglyphs, and they're kind of interesting. One of them is definitely a percentage, like the percent sign. It's just the slash with two circles, but it's also just a slash with two circles. But all of the rest of them are alien. One of them is like a W with 3 of the U's.
Oh, good.
Anyway, the leader then showed Betty a star map before letting her know Barney's examination had also finished. The two were then accompanied back to the car, where they would watch the craft take off before getting back on the road, ending the dream. So now you may be confused. Other than the needle, it would seem like Betty kind of had a good time. She got to talk to them. She wasn't really treated badly. The only thing that hurt was the needle, and it was for like 10 seconds before they stopped the pain. So it's kind of like, why is that so bad, right? Why are they so freaked out? But Betty had another recurring dream, which continued after these nightmares had run their course, giving more context to the anxiety of her dreams. And I think from what they said, Barney also kind of was having these dreams as well, but I don't know if that's 100% true. I could be wrong. Every time it would start with her and Barney on vacation, looking out the cabin window, when suddenly a large wave of craft started flying over the horizon, like waves and waves of UFOs started coming over. Betty would tell Barney that they should go out to the crafts, that they should return to them, but just then, everything would change. Fire would engulf the entire landscape, and everything around them would start being destroyed, and the planet they once knew would be gone. She would then wake up in a cold sweat. So though the main set of dreams don't seem all that bad, the recurring dream that followed for months and months later made her feel like she was in constant danger in her sleeping life and in her waking life. And this dream is what caused the most anxiety because, again, the whole thing for Barney is the control of the situation, and he's watching his wife spiral, and he can't do a thing about it because she is worried about otherworldly beings. There is no control in that situation.
Yeah.
And Barney, I think, really suffered. He stressed a lot. At this point, He's trying to balance his life with the hypnotherapy. He's going to work still traveling 4 hours a day, doing the overnights, still driving to Philly to see his sons as much as he can.
He's
Like,
probably
this
petrified
man,
on the road, too.
Bro, this fucking poor guy, like legitimately the last 10 years of his life were a nightmare. Just an absolute nightmare. Waking nightmare. Just really, really bad. Anyway, what is hypnosis therapy?
What is it?
What is it?
What's hypnosis therapy?
What's hypnosis therapy?
What is hypnosis therapy?
Hey, what's hypnosis therapy?
You know what hypnosis therapy is?
Vin, what's hypnosis therapy? Now, after all this time, we are finally at the point of hypnosis. All right, Mike, look at me. No, I'm just joking. The Interrupted Journey by John G. Fuller, according to Kathleen Marden, was written to sensationalize the story. She claims that Fuller was given full access to the original tape from the Hills of the therapy sessions, and he chose to cherry pick the emotional parts while scrapping the quote-unquote boring bits. So for her and Friedman's book, the pair decided to omit all of the emotional testimony to fill the gaps left behind by the Interrupted Journey. So how hypnotherapy works is obviously very complex. So bear with me while I attempt to explain. I'm going to give you... So my sister worked in psych places before, and she was able to just give me some insight on this. So this is coming from someone who has worked in the field, and this kind of changed my whole idea, because I kind of thought hypnosis therapy up until this point was bullshit. Mm-hmm. The way I described it to my sister is someone who's not... I'm not at all interested in medicine. I talk about regional monsters. I don't give a fuck about taking blood. So when it comes to like this type of stuff, I just assume you were doing this in 1964. We also did lobotomies in 1964, and this seems like it could be bullshit. So that's probably also bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No,
so
I
just assumed this was fake. It turns out it's not, and hypnotherapy is actually something that's still used today, has been developed, and even though we don't understand how it's working, we understand very well of how to do it and what it could be used for.
It's like power of suggestion, right? It's like based on...
So basically, to your point, through a process we'll just describe as science magic, because I genuinely don't feel like we have time to get into what specifically is putting you in a trance. A suggestive person could be put into a trance. While in this trance, the conscious parts of their brain that register fear and anxiety, along with other emotions like happiness, sadness, like the things that tie emotion to a story, are more or less pushed back, and your subconscious is coming forward, which is your more logical, straightforward, moral brain. So the idea is that you're basically taking the emotion out of the story and just giving the most detailed, logical version of what happened.
Yeah.
And I saw this described in a YouTube video by a doctor as having a daydream, but with much more control. So basically, it's like if you've ever like really fell into a daydream to the point that you were like, oh shit, and you woke yourself up, you were doing self-hypnosis basically.
Oh.
And that
happens more often than I like to admit.
That is basically what happens, just with more control and with more purpose.
Right.
Hypnosis therapy is still used today, having been nearly perfected for very specific things like quitting smoking, like you said, suggestive things like quitting smoking, food addiction, and very interestingly, it could be used to treat secondary symptoms of IBS, which I did not know. That's kind of fucking nuts. So if you have IBS and you have stomach problems, you have back pain associated with your stomach problems, like things that occur because you have IBS, you could be hypnotherapy trained to more or less not let the IBS tense you so much so that you could relax and it doesn't cause you muscle strain. It's extremely interesting. And though I found that it's not like as perfected as quitting smoking and food addiction and that specifically, it's very, very effective for people.
Yeah, there's got to be science behind this.
My brain just shut off. But yeah, so this is super, super interesting. I did not know this.
This is very cool.
But as with all things, there's a limit. And when it comes to hypnosis therapy, memory extraction may be that limit depending on who you talk to. Some researchers have found that hypnosis is able to recall memories with more clarity than not, while others argue the total opposite, stating that this type of therapy implants false memories. And through hypnosis, these memories essentially become reality for the patient. Either way, in my interpretation, it would seem that the person asking the questions is responsible for not implanting false memories, the same way that a detective would be responsible for not implanting a false confession in someone being interrogated. You don't ask questions, don't ask leading questions. So if I hypnotize you, I shouldn't ask you, tell me about when you got abducted by aliens. I would ask you, what happened that night?
Right.
You tell me I saw craft. Okay, now that we established by you that you saw craft, now I can mention the craft. I could affirm what you say. I can't introduce new information. Mm-hmm. And I truly, just by his reputation and by how all this went and how he was able to evaluate it all afterwards, I really, truly think that Dr. Simon did this well and did this the way he was supposed to. So, we are going to start the hypnosis sessions with Barney's sessions first. The reason being is because Barney's sessions are a lot less detailed. Because I shit you not, Barney kept his eyes closed for 95% of the entire thing because he was so fucking scared that he says he kept his eyes closed. So he's describing things in as much detail as he can. It's not that he has less to say. It's just he has less to talk about with those things because he just can't. There's just no visual descriptions for a lot of it. Dr. Simon did not believe in UFOs and truly believed that he was giving them this therapy to relieve their stress, not to uncover the biggest abduction case in history. It started on February 22nd, 1964. After months of it's 3 weeks. After 3 weeks of conditioning Betty and Barney Hill for hypnosis with the following commands. You ready? Cue the music. All right, trance Betty/Barney. Go deeper and deeper asleep. Far asleep, deeper and deeper, fully relaxed. All muscles are relaxed, deeper and deeper asleep, deeper asleep, sleep. When you touch your hands, your arms will become rigid, like a bar of steel rigid. It cannot bend or relax, very rigid. Now when I touch the top of your hand, you'll lose all sensation. You will not feel this pin, no pain whatsoever. Now as I stroke your hand, sensation becomes normal. The arm will relax. You go deeper and deeper. Now you're in a very deep sleep. Your memory is now sharp, all very sharp. You will remember everything that has occurred, all of your experiences. You will not be anxious or distressed, and you will remember everything, and you will be everything. I want you to go back to your vacation 1961 when you were in Hampshire. Now, that may have sounded super sexual as word for word what that says.
Nuts.
The deeper and deeper. That's word for word what that says. I'm sorry about the porno music. That's what I'm putting over that.
Fully relaxed.
Yeah, deeper and deeper, fully relaxed, rigid, very rigid.
Like a bar of steel.
Like a bar of steel. So, following those orders, they would fall into a deep trance where the hypnotherapist would do whatever he wanted. No, I'm just joking. That's gross. While in this trance, they would be open to talking about things that they would normally find difficult, i.e. being potentially abducted by UFOs. For the first two sessions, Dr. Simon started with the time from when they left on vacation all the way up to the encounter. So once he felt that this has been sufficiently grounded and combed through, he moved on. I'm not going to get into this. It's all of the little details about their vacation. This is not a vacation review podcast of Montreal.
Just look it up, guys.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. I want to get into the fucking the aliens.
Aliens and spaceships.
Basically, he just confirms that all the details of them getting in the car, where they went, the place they stayed, blah, 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 and just confirmed that they were both telling the same story. That being said, the Hills described the events that they had for the last few years. A craft followed them down the highway, and after some convincing by Betty, Barney gets out and looks at the craft through his binoculars.
I see everything.
And this is where the details of the story start to come to light. I was just going to say this is where the details of the story start to come. Barney says the beings seemed to be conveying smiles, though he wasn't sure if they were actually smiling. And that is scary.
Yeah.
Because if you've ever seen a chimp show their teeth and it looks like they're smiling, it's because they want you to be fucking dead. And that's very scary to me because I'm afraid of gorillas.
Yeah.
And chimpanzees. I've seen Oprah. That lady's face, I don't care how many surgeries she has, she looks like she got ripped apart by a monkey. I'm sorry, you look beautiful. Everyone's beautiful on the inside. The leader, who wore a leathery black coat, then looked right at him, which made Barney very distressed at the time and during the session. So he was very distressed in the field, and he also was equally distressed in the session. And this part is in the movie. And in the movie, Barney gets up and starts screaming, James Earl Jones, and tries to climb out the window, and it's very funny.
Oh, God.
I really like
I just
that
see
part.
him just like...
Yeah. And it's just this guy like coaxing him like, Bonnie, you got to come in, Bonnie. It's great. It's so good.
I don't have to do anything.
If you wait, I can find it.
That's all right.
That's okay. He said he could feel him watching even after the craft was long gone, the leader, stating his gaze was both terrifying and captivating. This is when he freaked out, running back to the car and hurrying away while telling Betty, I keep saying Benny, while telling Betty they were going to get captured. Okay.
Oh, that's scary too. Just like, that's it, we're done.
God, it's so scary. it's just like the whole thing of, again, last episode we listened to the clip from the movie. I don't know if you remember, it was last week, but we listened to the clip from the movie, and it was it basically talks about how he felt like he was a rabbit that he caught when he was a kid, and he now understands how the rabbit felt. Yeah, where it felt like it was secure and safe, and it really wasn't. And no matter how safe he felt under a tree, they were watching him. They knew he was there. There's no way to hide.
No sense of security.
No sense of safety whatsoever. Yeah. This is when the beeping noises were heard, but instead of the craft disappearing and time being lost, like we heard in the original story, the Hills started to relive what happened that night in their hypnosis therapy. After the beeps were heard, Barney almost subconsciously drove off the highway, not understanding why he did so, onto a secluded road where they were met with a large glowing orange ball floating behind trees. And just in front of them were a dozen or so of these little beings with their big Jimmy Durante noses, ready to confront the Hills. The car then stalled on its own, stopped, and at this moment, the beings started to approach. Betty freaked the fuck out and wanted to get out and run, but she couldn't physically move. She was like, they almost
frozen.
Like, it was more frozen with fear and less of like a supernatural freezing thing. They described it more that they were dazed and less that they were like fully under a trance, or like they were probably more under a trance in hypnosis than they were from the aliens, from what it seems. At least Betty compared to Barney. The Hills both described the intense fear and want to escape, but at the same time, they felt like they were in a daze, like I said. The beings then escorted them away from the car and into the craft that had been following them. Barney described being carried onto the ship, not walking, but with his feet scraping the floor.
Oh.
Now, contributing to the impossibly scuffed shoes. And I say impossibly scuffed because I sat here all day while writing, trying to think of a fucking way that you'd scuff the top of your shoes other than doing it on purpose. And I cannot think of it. And we're going to get back to this later.
Well, somebody could drag you.
We're going to get back to this later. But I'm saying other than that, because they're saying that obviously couldn't have happened because aliens. This is like so unbelievable to me. I'm jumping ahead. He also claimed he didn't remember anything during this time about Betty. He kept his eyes closed during this entire process. Betty was a little bit less willing to be escorted. Billy's
now part of the club. Billy and Barney and Betty.
and Benny.
And
Billy, Barney, Betty, and Betty.
They're like that family, the guy that barks.
The BBB&B. Sounds like a southern gas station. I'm going down to the BBB&B to get some gas. Betty was a little less willing to be escorted quietly. She tried to call Barney, with the beings taking note of his name. Literally, she said that she turned around and was like, Barney! Barney! And then the beings like, Barney. His name is Barney. Interesting. Good to know. So that's kind of fun. She claimed that he was in a daze as they carried him on board. So it sounds like Barney was much more sedated. Yeah. So I don't know if it's just like they just assumed he would be more of a threat than she would, because he was much more physically imposing. He was a big dude. He was like 6'4".
Oh, wow.
He's a big guy, and she was not particularly large. She was probably like 5'5". Betty was then calmed down by one of the beings, claiming that it told her that it wouldn't harm them and would only perform some easy tests. She claimed that this didn't harm her at all, and she tried to struggle, with her dress being torn in the process. So now we got the scuff shoes and we got the dress. I forgot to mention, this is also the time that apparently during a struggle, they ripped the binoculars off of Betty. And that's
Barney?
how Betty. God damn it.
Barney.
No, Betty.
Barney.
I don't know why I said it 2 times. No, Betty. So I think Betty was holding them because she just grabbed them when they were out of the car, or Barney handed them when he got in the car, whatever it was. Once on board the ship, they were able to give very detailed description of the beings, with them both claiming, again, they were 5-ish feet tall with grayish metallic skin. They spoke with indiscernible accents, had cat-like eyes, and again, very large Durante-style noses. Though the two did disagree on the leader, Betty claiming he was taller and more fair skin, while Barney claims that they were all similar build and skin tone. So
these guys are just northern Italians.
Okay, so
that's all they are.
So this is interesting because there has been a long-running conspiracy about the gray aliens. We've talked about them on the show again. Kind of a controversial name. The tall whites, which is I swear that's what they're called.
Yeah, no, there is. You're right though.
Yeah.
There's the tall whites.
It's-
There's the grays. There's
It's
different
the
races.
grays and then the whites. And the grays.
Anunnaki.
Yeah, the grays are supposedly, from how the theories go, the grays are either like a lesser working version of either they're robots or they're genetic.
They're like
machines
their blue collar.
They're basically like their blue collar workforce, but they're produced. They're made in the lab and then sent out into the world.
Aren't these the hybrids? Aren't these that there's talks of the grays being hybrids?
It all depends on what theory you're talking about. The grays are everything. They could be SpongeBob. Yeah. It's fucking unreal.
X-Files.
But the interesting thing is what I'm saying is basically Barney describes everyone, including the leader that he was with, as grays, while she describes it being grays with one tall white. That's basically what it seems like.
Okay.
So it seems like maybe Barney just didn't come in contact with him because they were separated.
Maybe.
So who knows? Or it just didn't happen. Once on board, the two were then put into separate rooms, with Barney's being metallic and cold with nothing but an examination table, while Betty's room was similar with a few more cabinets and some tools on the wall. The lights in the ship were blue, with no shadows being cast anywhere, and though everything was metallic, it was said to be metallic white, so it was like very bright everywhere. The two waited while the beings prepared them for the tests. Anal probing. That's the next thing. Not really. They don't get anally probed. I just feel like that's the stereotype. Barney's recollection of the events were pretty straightforward, yet much less detailed. Barney was fucking terrified of what was happening and kept his eyes closed the entire event, only opening them instinctually to see what they were doing to him. So the same way that if you had your eyes closed because you were afraid, as soon as you get poked with something, you're going to look because you're like, what the fuck are they doing? That's kind of what was happening to him. So he was just getting these fucking terrifying glimpses of these creatures that are doing these experiments. It's wild. He said that they examined him top to bottom, focusing specifically on his bone structure, with them scratching a stick on his upper arm as some sort of non-invasive biopsy. After what was presumably hours, they finished off by putting a cup over Barney's penis, with him claiming that it was covered in a sort of solution. I think Barney doesn't want to admit that he came in that cup.
Probably.
Because he said that they gave a sperm sample, but he never got erect and he never ejaculated. So I'm going to say they jerked him off in a cup.
Probably.
And I know that that's the last podcast joke, but it's not a joke. I genuinely do think that that's what he's trying to say without saying it. So good on Barney. Maybe that's where he got the warts, was the aliens had venereal diseases. He then says they took samples from every orifice in his body, which is fucking terrifying. So that's awful, because that includes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, your asshole, the head of your fucking penis, like every hole in your body. Yeah, awful, really bad.
That's it.
The head of your penis.
Mine.
Betty's procedure was simultaneously less stressful, yet more invasive. This is going to sound very familiar because this is now the story, and now you can compare this to Betty's dreams, which is basically what Dr. Simon was doing. Betty was laid down and stripped just like Barney was. They then performed the same inspection of her body, but focused more on her skin and less on her bones as they did with Barney. They then came to the pregnancy test, which she had described in her dreams. The beings took a surprisingly large needle and just plunged it right into her belly button, causing her to lash out in pain. The being administrating the test was so surprised by the reaction that, again, he waved his hand over her head to make the pain go away and then apologized profusely, claiming that he wouldn't have done it if he knew it was going to hurt her so bad. He genuinely seemed like he did not understand that it was going to hurt her and was like, yo, my bad. Fucking sorry, bro.
These are like gods.
It's almost comforting at the fact that they were like, yo, I'm sorry, my bad.
And also, like, we can fix it. We can fix it.
Yeah. Like, oh, yeah. It's kind of cute. You know, it's kind of like an
experiment on humans.
Yeah. So it would seem that Betty's examination was a lot faster and more friendly compared to Barney's, which I attribute to Betty's level-headedness in the situation compared to Barney's just complete breakdown of his own self. Betty would talk to the beings, with them showing her a star map and joking that it was no use showing her where they lived because she wouldn't understand it anyway, which is funny in hindsight, since that star map was reproduced by Betty. But what I think is funny is that the way this is written, it's not like Betty was sitting there like, oh, like, where do you live? And they were all like, she wants to know where we live. It was more like they were like, oh, I can't tell you because you don't know anyway. And they all just kind of laughed like it was a sitcom, like including Betty. And I love that.
I wouldn't get it.
I love that. I want this to happen to me. They could take skin. They could have a chunk of it.
The whole thing?
Yeah, take a real biopsy. You don't even need to numb it. I'll take it. No problem. Take me.
Okay. They're going to take him.
I wish they would just fucking take me. Once they were finished, Betty claimed that she was given a book by the leader and almost got off the ship with it before it was taken back from her, causing her to lose her temper. So in her dream, it's a lot more comical. In the story, it seems like they gave her the book to placate her. And then when they were getting her off the ship, just to shut her up. And then when they were getting her off, they're like, haha, just kidding.
Give this back, yeah.
Once they got off the ship, the leader would say that he needs to make sure that she doesn't remember anything that happened, almost laughing about it. Like, I'm going to now make sure you're never going to remember any of this, more or less. And Betty defiantly stared at him and said, I will remember this. Watch me. And that she did. And this is the point of the story where the hypnosis therapy was over, and Dr. Simon officially lifted the amnesia off of the Hills to conclude their session. So after every session, he would put them back. Basically, he would make them forget it all again, so that they wouldn't go into like a trauma state or anything like that. And with the 11 hours of therapy over countless Saturdays, months and months, every Saturday they would go for an hour for 11 weeks, figure, right? Leaving Dr. Simon stunned to make sense of what happened, with his professional name up in the air, making him genuinely worry about his future, because he was like, how the fuck am I supposed to explain this? And the reason being is because Dr. Simon genuinely believed what they were saying. He believed that they believed what they were saying. He didn't necessarily believe they were abducted, but he said, there's no way I could tell you that this is fake or real. So I think that he is skeptical. I think that he is worried to say that he believes in what happened, because he's worried how he's going to be taken professionally. But I do think that he believes them and thinks that this is unreal, because he was kind of obsessed.
Is he still
with
alive?
This. I don't think he is, but he...
Oh, wait, this was the 60s, so definitely not.
I want to say he was
definitely
dead in the
not.
80s, yeah. So the aftermath, again, shout out Dr. Dre. So after all this, the Hills were doing a little bit better, other than the warts above, Barney's penis. During the interview process, speaking of the warts above Barney's penis, they strangely flared up, with them being diagnosed officially as genital warts by view alone. Okay?
Okay.
I'm sorry. By description alone. The doctor supposedly didn't see them until they were going to remove them. Okay? I didn't know you could have genital warts removed.
Yeah.
It was at this point that the doctor supposedly changed his mind after doing the surgery, saying that it was just a coincidence on how they were placed, and they weren't warts. They were just beauty marks. A perfect circle of 21 or so beauty marks that were all consistent sizes. And now, again, this was diagnosed as genital warts before they saw it, but everyone was like, I don't understand how this could happen. And the genital warts theory, again, I looked up pictures of genital warts, as I said the last episode, or maybe the beginning of this one. And it was a week ago, I don't remember. And it was, they were definitely not in perfect circles. No. I would say they're anything but. They're very, very chaotic looking.
Yeah. He's got something.
It looks like cauliflower, like little pieces of cauliflower.
He's got something else going on.
I don't think that he had a venereal disease.
No,
I think that he might have just had something else that maybe was a coincidence, or the cup that they put on his penis was, full of something.
Yeah. Maybe he got bit. I don't know. By a piranha.
Betty. Once this was over, the Hills went back to normal for the most part. Dr. Simon ultimately was not convinced that they were abducted by aliens, at least not professionally, outwardly, though he did feel that they believed everything they said, and that would seem like it was the end of the story for the Hills, much to the thankfulness for Dr. Simon. As much as he was interested in this and wanted to know more, he also just wanted it to be fucking over, so that he wouldn't have this like embarrassment on his
hanging over his head forever. Yeah.
As for the Hills themselves, Barney tried to go back to her normal life, but seemed haunted by the whole thing until the day he died. With Benny, God fucking damn it if I say Benny one more time. With Betty becoming semi-obsessed, if not fully obsessed with alien sightings, with her being contacted by everyone from the UN down to locals in her town that had heard the story. At this point, it hadn't really gone mainstream. It was big in the town, and it was big with government agencies because they were curious on what happened. But for the most part, no one.
It wasn't like pop culture.
Not yet. But they had forgotten something. And it wasn't just the event of them being abducted. Right when everything had happened, they had told some family and friends, including a church group. Well, unbeknownst to them, the friends in the church group had told others, and the words had spread. and eventually made its way to John Luttrell, a reporter for a Boston paper. Now, they didn't know, but their church friends recorded the entire conversation and sold it to John Luttrell.
Oh, good. Good.
In the light of Christ.
Good people.
Just like Jesus did when he flipped that table over in the temple.
Dude loved it. He was
Luttrell, sorry, my bad. I'm just so upset about the name of Jesus Christ being slaughtered. Luttrell had gotten in touch with National Inquiry for Capturing Ass Pirates, Walter Webb, getting from him a recording of the Hill story from the night that they were told that they told the church group. Once it would make the rounds and eventually get to John G. Fuller, he would go on to write The Interrupted Journey, kind of working with them. He got the tapes from them. He spoke to Dr. Simon. He was pretty involved. It's kind of unfortunate that he wrote the book the way he did, because if Kathleen Martin wasn't related, he would easily have been the one to have the most access to the information. And he really chose to sell a book that would make him money and not so much to tell a truthful story, which is fine if you don't put it forward as their truthful story. So it gave them a lot of heartache, because it became so sensationalized that papers were basically calling them all different things.
Yeah.
And they were just embarrassed. They were just like, this isn't what we wanted. We didn't even want anyone to know. They fought really hard to not have this go to the public. He would then go on to write The Interrupted Journey, and the Hill's interaction with the unknown would become a phenomenon worldwide. Soon they would be bombarded by letters, adding to Benny's curiosity while piling onto Barney's stress. So now we're going to get into the unfortunate death of Barney and the discovery of the star map, which unfortunately Barney never got to see, which is very sad to me. February 25th, 1969, Barney would die of a stroke, which really, really devastated Benny, like really bad. The Hills had both been at odds on how to handle the entire situation, but always maintained a very strong, loving relationship. It may sound like they argued a lot about what to do, and they did, but they very much loved each other and trusted each other, and it must have been hard for Betty. Even if this didn't happen, she thinks it did, and it must have been hard for her to know that the only fucking person on the planet that understands what they went through that day died so young because of what they went through that day.
Yeah.
I mean, the stress of this is basically directly influenced on why he died.
Yeah.
As Benny and Barney were both struck with health problems in the late 60s, this bond would only grow. It would seem the abduction really had an effect on them, seeing as Betty, Barney, and even the dog Delcy all had health problems only a few years after the event. Delcy died like 2 years later, with Barney and Delcy passing very young. But Betty's the only one that made it out somewhat, okay. But she was very, very sick for her entire life after that. With things that would, point to things like radiation and stuff like that with cancer, but we live in America. Cancer's everywhere. Once Betty had grieved, she started to become involved in the UFO community, doing interviews and meeting other witnesses of the otherworldly. Eventually, she would get in touch with Maori Fish, who is somewhat well-known in the UFO sphere. You may have heard that name before. And together, they would investigate the star map drawn by Betty all those years before. And after a long, extensive investigation that we will skip most of to save from going into part 3, the star map was actually fucking identified, becoming one of the most important pieces of evidence of aliens literally ever recorded. And I will stand by that. This is unfucking real. The map lines up near perfect to a star map of Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 and the surrounding stars. And just to show how crazy there are, this is a typo. There were more than 10,000 stars in that star system alone, and she managed to get the pattern down to match 10 of the 13 stars in that pattern, with 3 of them later being discovered.
So she definitely saw some shit.
Fucking unreal. This star map being identified.
I remember reading about this, yeah.
This star map being identified gives the story the credibility it needed all along. And with that, Betty finally felt that she had the answers she'd been looking for all these years, at least to give her the answers for that night. She was never fully satisfied. She even went back on herself later in life and claimed maybe it didn't happen. Maybe she did make it up because it was so unbelievable, which to me makes her more credible. Because if you made it up and you stuck to it for 30 plus years, who the fuck is going to, after all this time of sticking to a lie that you know is a lie, who's going to sit there and go, maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was just mistaken.
Yeah.
That's a really mature, fucked up thing for someone to go through with something like this.
Yeah.
And, obviously this is a lot more fantastical, but it happens to people that are involved in violent crime, in PTSD with war and stuff like that, where it gets to a point they're like, was it really that bad when they get far away, and then they start to have issues and it starts to come back. So it's a cycle of this type of thing. And I think she did go through that to a point. Betty would unfortunately also pass on October 23rd, 2004 of lung cancer. She lived quite a while, having remained a prominent figure on the UFO circuit until this point. And her bloodline does live on, funny enough, with her their niece.
Their granddaughter.
Oh, granddaughter. Yeah. Their granddaughter. It is, I believe, one of Barney's son's daughters. Yeah. And she is in the UFC, and she was just on fucking Joe Rogan getting interviewed. Yeah. And Joe Rogan didn't know that she was his niece and his granddaughter, and I was like, that is fucking super cool. Mm-hmm. I didn't watch the interview. I don't really watch Rogan like that, but it was, I just thought that was so fucking cool and just super coincidental that it happened at the same time as this episode going on. So just another way that we live in a simulation. So that's the basic, that's the real meat of the story. Like, all of the prep work we did kind of leads to that. It leads to the fact that this does kind of look like something happened. It matches up. And if this is all a coincidence that the top of his shoes just happen to get scuffed, they just happen to have the tattered dress, they just happen to draw the same craft, all of that stuff lines up, sure, it could be a coincidence. But in my head, that's a lot of fucking coincidences. And a couple of coincidences is a lot of coincidences. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So now, of course, let's get into the other side of the argument. You know how I feel about it, but there are explanations put forward to try and debunk the Hills, and rightfully so. So let's start with the craft. This is often attributed to a spotlight on the top of a mountain that they would have driven by, as well as a giant glowing jack-o'-lantern on top of a store on the same route that they were driving. So the idea is that the spotlight combined with the jack-o'-lantern would make it look like there was a glowing ball that was moving. And then the spotlight would light up a part of the rock that would make it almost look like there was something floating in the air. But all of those things to happen at one time is kind of fucking nuts. And the fact that they saw the ball moving and it wasn't a ball of light while it was moving, it was only a ball of light when they were looking at it through the trees, makes me think that this isn't necessarily correct.
Yeah.
Even if, and I'm not saying that it was aliens. I'm just saying I just feel like this is like we're really grasping it. We're just taking anything that could look like a red ball of fire in the sky and saying that was it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Skeptics also claim that Barney was just misunderstanding what he saw, and the rest of the story was just hypnosis-induced false memory. And as for the star map, it was all a coincidence, and the stars just happened to line up. People say, like, yeah, you have stars in the sky. It's 3D space. You could turn it any way you want, and it'll eventually make it the same shape. And that's just not how that works.
Yeah.
Like, and to that, I say boo. As a major skeptic, this story gives me the feeling of when you watch Harry Potter for the first time as a kid and you think magic is real until you're proven wrong. That little period of time where you're like, holy shit, magic is real. That is what I felt the entire time reading about. Genuinely, like childhood fucking excitement.
Nice.
But reality has a hard time proving this one wrong. And if we are on the same page that the Hills aren't lying, they may just not remember correctly, then how do you explain the star map, the tattered dress, Barney's shoes being scraped on top, the perfect ring of warts on his cock, and much, much more? How do you explain it? You know, like the shoes, the reason I focus on the shoes is because, okay, we have all come to the conclusion, including medical professionals, that Betty and Barney Hill believe what they're saying, right? Which means that they didn't fabricate this and do it themselves. The only thing I could think of that would have scraped shoes that you could do that is if you were walking like a fucking moron for a prolonged period of time and dragging the top of your foot 1 foot at a time, or you took your shoes off and dragged them across the floor, which we're going to rule out saying that they didn't do. So unless Barney doesn't remember walking like an absolute moron for an extended period of time in shoes that he loved and claimed were his favorite shoes, ruining them in the process, I don't understand how this could be anything else other than he was dragged. I'm exhausted.
I see that.
Fucking so shot. Plus the warts on his cock.
The warts
Perfect
on his
ring.
cock. Perfect ring.
I would have paid money to see this man's dick. You have no idea how much money I would have. I searched so much. The amount of words I typed into Google to find this man's penis is unbelievable. In conclusion, this story has legitimately changed my view of abductions, as you could tell, because I am basically sweating aliens. I always found them interesting and fun, but useless. Just kind of like, again, Harry Potter. This story, to me, is the most credible alien encounter I have ever researched in detail. Whatever happened that night, it caused the Hills to go through one of the craziest experiences of their lives. They never received money or wanted fame, actively trying to not be talked about, and seemed to really suffer from all of it from beginning to end. And that is why I believe that Betty and Barney Hill were abducted, legitimately. And that is the conclusion of Betty and Barney Hill. Maybe this is the decline of me. You know? Maybe this is the decline of me. It's okay, Vin. Cough. It's okay.
Is the end.
This is it. It's okay, Vin. Cough. I know. It's okay. It's okay. It's all right. Let it out, bud. How do you feel? Like, after giving you all this, like, how do you... I know that you're a little less skeptical than me generally about this stuff. But, like, where do you stand?
I would love to say aliens, but I definitely 110% think that they were part of something that if it was planned by humans, planned by the government, planned by something else.
Oh shit! I didn't even think of it from that aspect. Like this was like a governmental thing.
I thought maybe it has something to do with beginning MK Ultra stages. Early that it could be the interracial. Let's see what we can do. Just I don't know. Especially and you kept bringing up the drag in his shoes thing.
Hold on a second. I just realized this. They've given black men disease like sexual
the Tuskegee
experiment. Specifically. So that's a fucking actually good point. I didn't think about it like that. And then that's an easy way to make him sound crazy is to make it aliens.
And they would make him lose his own mind by power of suggestion towards him. And
I still believe it's aliens.
Yeah, it's probably aliens, but I'm just saying.
100%.
And the blue military suits too. That was a big.
So
thing.
the blue military suits were only in the dreams.
All right. Well, the dreams were real.
The blue military suits weren't in the dreams. What? Weren't in the encounter. weren't in the encounter.
They weren't wearing suits that were blue.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching this episode. Like, legitimately, this is the most research I've ever done for a fucking episode. I would say that I'm an expert in the Betty and Barney Hill. I could probably write a dissertation for college, fake college, because who cares?
Yeah.
I'm fucking tired. Man, this has been a long week in between episodes.
Yeah, this has been a very long week in between episodes. The 1 week that we had in between episodes.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah.
I appreciate you hanging out.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something.
Yeah.
And make sure you fucking cannibalize it.
You just eat it with
the
your...
subscribe button. I keep saying like button. Eat the subscribe button. Eat it with a... Eat your heart out. Like Jeffrey Dahmer.
Give it the munch.
That's a lyric of a song in a Katy Perry song. Isn't that crazy?
That's nuts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Thank you, Mike, again. You can find him in the socials below his face. You can find me at the socials below my face. Here's some more things below my face for things. If you like the show, please leave a review. It helps a ton. Write something. Thanks. Tell your fucking grandparents. And this, I'm going to tell you, man. At the end of the day, I'm that rabbit.